Welcome to ForexTV.com. Today is Thursday, October 30th. I'm Kathleen Reddington with your New York Forex Market Buzz. Disappointing data drove stocks lower and the U.S. dollar gains on the euro and the yen. And now for a look at the latest headlines from the CUP News Desk. The U.S. GDP was a little better than expected. The report showed the U.S. economy contracting by 0.3% in the third quarter. This was against expectations of a 0.5% decline. Underground natural gas storage in the U.S. increased 46 billion cubic feet for this week. Expectations had been for a 40 billion cubic feet increase. Initial claims for unemployment benefits in the U.S. held steady at 479,000 for this week. Continuing claims fell to 3.715 million, which was lower than expected. Initial jobless claims were expected to fall back slightly to 475,000, and last week's figure was revised up by 1,000 to 479,000. The Eurozone Business Climate Indicator fell below expectations in October, coming in at negative 1.34 for the month, down from both the negative 0.91 reading expected and the previous negative 0.82 figure. Today we are joined by Matthew Strauss of RBC Capital Markets. Hi Matthew, how are you?
No, fine, thank you, Kathy. It's good to be on the show again.
Glad to hear it. We saw a shrink in the U.S. GDP, but the dollar's been gaining. It was down a little bit earlier, but has pretty much gained since. Many said that this contraction was a signal of a recession. Why hasn't the dollar taken to it as such?
I think it has to do very much with the details of the data. Because if you look at the data, your consumer spending came in much more negative than what the market was looking for. They were looking for a number just higher than a minus 2%. It came in minus 3.1%, and given that consumers contribute about 70% to the U.S. GDP, that is a very important component that we are really concerned about. And if we look at the consumer confidence earlier in the week that fell to record lows, it bodes very ill for consumer spending going into the fourth quarter. So that was part what was troubling the market. On the positive side, we had net exports contributing strongly to growth, but we've seen the U.S. dollar strengthening during the course of the third quarter. So ultimately, it will start impacting the U.S. exports, and consequently the support from net exports will probably fall towards zero in 2009. So going forward, continued concern about consumer spending, and the one positive from today's report is expected to wane in the coming quarters.
We've seen the yen decline this morning as well, and we practically saw a vertical plummet with it against the dollar earlier on. Are we seeing a correction in the yen?
I think the yen at the moment has found some stability around the 98 level, and as long as it remains close to 98, so basically between a 97 and a 99 level, that will indicate to us that the market is comfortable with these levels. For the yen, however, tonight's BOJ meeting, very, very important, because earlier in the week speculation emerged that the Bank of Japan will cut by 25 basis points, and on the back of that, we saw a strong sell-off in the yen. And now the risk is, if the Bank of Japan does not deliver on that 25 basis points tonight, that we could see a rally in the yen, basically taking back the sell-off that we've seen earlier in the week.
The Canadian dollar held steady after commodities fell, and was yesterday's boost in commodities just what the CAD needed to help it stabilize, or do you think that the Canadian dollar will soon follow these commodities downward the rest of the day?
I think that the pressure is already again on the Canadian dollar with commodities falling. As we head into month end, we do expect some increased choppy trading and wild swings. So where it will end the day and where it will end tomorrow would be very difficult to predict. But I think ultimately, with the concerns about the global economy and the global economy falling into a mild recession into 2009, the pressure will be on commodities and ultimately the Canadian dollar going into year-end and the early part of 2009.
Now, the pound also dropped against the dollar today after 2 days of gains. What do you think is driving sterling?
Well, I think the drop against the U.S. dollar has to do with broad-based US dollar moves, because the drop in sterling was also in line with the movement in euro dollar. And the US dollar at the moment very, very closely tied to risk aversion or risk appetite. Every time we see equity markets increasing as a sign that there's some risk appetite returning to the market, it's putting downward pressure on the US dollar across the different currencies and vice versa. The bit of strength that we saw in the US dollar against sterling, against the euro this morning, had to do with the equity market coming off. It opened this morning very strongly and then almost dipped down to 0%, and now, as we speak, starting to tick up again.
All right, Matthew, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
This has been your New York Forex Market Buzz with Matthew Strauss of RBC Capital Markets. I'm Kathleen Reddington. Join us later this afternoon for PM Exchange right here on ForexTV.com.